Canto al cielo mi dolor. Hoy mi sueño es realidad.
Before we begin, I'd like to ask you for a small favor. I'm really hoping to break through the magical barrier of 1,000 subscribers. That number holds a special significance for me. Hit that subscribe button. It's just one click, but for me, it's a huge boost of motivation to create my next video. Thank you in advance. Laughter erupted like gunfire in the auditorium as Kiara Mendoza's name was called to the stage for the school's karaoke night. "The janitor's daughter! This is going to be a disaster," someone shouted from the back. Murmurs quickly escalated into guffaws as the 11-year-old, clad in her second-hand dress and meticulously braided hair, shuffled uncertainly towards the center of the stage. Kiara knew. She knew perfectly well her name had been put on the list by Valentina Restrepo and her clique, the most popular girls at San Francisco school, who were now filming her on their phones, eager for the perfect viral video to mock for weeks. Don Ernesto, Kiara's father, watched from a corner, mopping the adjacent hallway floor, helpless, his heart breaking as he saw his little girl facing such public humiliation. Professor Jimena seemed oblivious to the cruelty unfolding, engrossed in organizing the presentation order for the cultural celebration the school had thrown to mark the end of the semester. No one intervened when Kiara was handed the microphone and the music began. The song chosen for her was a challenging ballad by a famous artist, clearly selected to guarantee her failure. The first notes washed over the auditorium as expectant silence mingled with suppressed giggles. Kiara closed her eyes, her young face tensed as she felt the weight of 300 pairs of eyes fixed upon her. Her small body trembled slightly under the stage lights. The braids her father had spent an hour meticulously weaving that morning now felt like chains. Valentina and her friends had planned this for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment to humiliate the mop girl, as they called her in the hallways. Kiara had heard the whispers, seen the disdainful glances, but she never thought they would go this far. San Francisco School was a prestigious institution in Ciudad del Valle, attended by the children of businessmen, politicians, and successful professionals. Kiara was only there because the principal had agreed to give her a full scholarship as the daughter of an employee. A unique opportunity, her father had told her, his eyes filling with pride. But that opportunity had become a daily hell of exclusion and ridicule. Don Ernesto worked double shifts to afford the school supplies and uniforms his daughter needed. Ever since Kiara's mother had passed away 3 years prior, he had been both mother and father, battling a system that seemed designed to keep him forever on the fringes. And now, as he mopped the hallway adjacent to the auditorium, he felt he had failed to protect the only thing that mattered to him in the world. The music continued, and Kiara opened her mouth. What emerged was not the disaster everyone expected. Her initially trembling voice began to rise with a power and clarity that no one, absolutely no one in that auditorium, had anticipated. A voice that seemed impossible for a child her age, rich with nuance and emotion. A voice that seemed to tell a story of pain and resilience with every note. The laughter died out like candles in a storm. Valentina dropped her phone. Professor Jimena turned sharply, her list of performers completely forgotten. Don Ernesto stood frozen, the mop dripping onto his worn shoes. The ballad, chosen to ensure her failure, now became the perfect vehicle to showcase an extraordinary talent that had remained hidden beneath layers of silence and dignity. Kiara sang with her eyes closed, transported to another place, perhaps beside her mother, who had taught her these songs before she left. Every note was perfect, every inflection laden with an emotion that many adults in the room had never experienced. The silence that followed when the last note faded was different from the tense silence at the beginning. It was a silence of awe, of disbelief, almost of reverence. And then, from the back of the auditorium, someone began to clap. It was a solitary applause at first, then more and more joined in, until it swelled into a deafening ovation. Some rose to their feet, others remained seated, too stunned to move. Valentina and her friends exchanged bewildered glances, their plans for humiliation having morphed into something entirely different. Kiara finally opened her eyes, surprised by the reaction. She wasn't used to being the center of attention like this. A single tear traced a path down her cheek as she gave a small curtsy and hurried off the stage, past Professor Jimena, who regarded her with an unreadable expression. Don Ernesto had dropped his mop to the floor and was clapping so hard his palms stung. His face was a poem of pride and unconditional love, But the story of Kiara Mendoza and her extraordinary voice did not end with those applause. What no one knew was that among the audience was Isabel Montero, a former opera singer who now ran the city's most prestigious music academy. Isabel had attended the event by pure chance, invited by a niece who studied at the school. When she heard Kiara's voice, she immediately recognized something she had seen only a few times in her long career. A pure, unpolished talent, but with extraordinary potential. The next day, as Don Ernesto scrubbed the second-floor tiles, the school principal summoned him to her office. The man walked in nervously, fearing something bad had happened with Kiara. Perhaps the bullying had worsened after the event. Perhaps his daughter was facing the consequences of shining too brightly in a place where she was expected to remain invisible. When he entered the office, he was surprised to see not only the principal, but also an elegant woman he didn't recognize, and Kiara, sitting with her hands clasped in her lap, looking at the floor. "Don Ernesto," the principal began, her tone unusually kind. "Mrs. Isabel Montero wishes to speak with you about your daughter." The man's heart pounded. He had learned to distrust unexpected situations. They rarely brought good news for people like him. Isabel stood and extended her hand. "Mr. Mendoza, yesterday I had the privilege of hearing your daughter sing. In my 40 years dedicated to music, I have rarely encountered such exceptional talent. I direct the Academy of Musical Arts of Ciudad del Valle, and I would like to offer Kiara a full scholarship to study with us." Don Ernesto looked at his daughter, who had now lifted her gaze, her eyes shining with a mixture of disbelief and hope. "But we can't. The materials, the transportation," he began, thinking of all the additional expenses this would represent. Isabel smiled with understanding. "The scholarship covers everything, Mr. Mendoza. Materials, uniforms, transportation, and even some performances. I firmly believe your daughter can have a brilliant future in the world of music, and our academy wants to be a part of that journey." The following weeks were a whirlwind for Kiara and her father. News of her talent and the scholarship spread rapidly through San Francisco school. The looks she now received in the hallways were different, some of admiration, others of curiosity, and some, like those from Valentina and her friends, of a strange mix of resentment and reluctant respect. Isabel Montero's academy was a whole new world. There, talent and dedication mattered more than designer clothes or last names. Kiara began to flourish not only as a singer, but as a person. Her voice grew stronger, more confident, both on and off stage. On Saturdays and Sundays, she practiced tirelessly while her father cooked, filling their small apartment with melodies that seemed to transform even the faded walls into something beautiful. Don Ernesto continued working at the school, cleaning the same hallways, scrubbing the same floors, but now he did so with a new dignity. Teachers greeted him with more respect, and even some students had started picking up their own trash, something unthinkable before. 6 months after the karaoke incident, the Academy organized its semester recital. It was an important event attended by personalities from the city's music and cultural world. Kiara, now with a little more confidence, but still nervous, was chosen to close the program. Don Ernesto asked for special permission at work to be able to attend, something he had never done before. He sat in the back row in his only good shirt, carefully ironed, feeling out of place among so many elegant people, but determined to support his daughter. When Kiara was announced, the audience applauded politely, most of them unaware of her story. She appeared on stage wearing a simple blue dress that Isabel had helped her choose. The music began, and once again Kiara closed her eyes for a moment. When she started to sing, the entire auditorium held its breath. Her voice had improved remarkably with the training she had received, but it retained that unique quality, that ability to convey emotions that transcended words. Don Ernesto couldn't hold back tears as he watched his little girl shine like never before. Among the audience was Leonardo Duran, a renowned music producer who had attended the recital at the insistence of Isabel, an old friend. "You have to hear this girl," she had told him. "She has something special." Leonardo was known for his skepticism and high standards. Few things managed to impress him after so many years in the industry. However, as Kiara sang, his expression shifted from polite boredom to genuine interest. When the performance concluded, he was one of the first to stand and applaud. After the recital, he approached Isabel, who was with Kiara and her father in the lobby. "You were right," he admitted. "This girl has something unique." He introduced himself to Don Ernesto and Kiara, explaining that he directed a young talent development program at a major record label. I would like you to consider the possibility of Kiara participating in our program. It would perfectly complement her training at the academy." Don Ernesto looked at his daughter, whose face was lighting up more and more. "What would that entail exactly?" he asked cautiously. Leonardo explained that the program included mentorship with established artists, recording sessions, and eventually, the possibility of releasing her own songs. "We don't aim to create instant stars," he clarified, "but to develop well-rounded artists with a solid foundation." A year after the day, Valentina and her friends had tried to humiliate Kiara at that school karaoke. The Mendoza family's life had changed in ways they could never have imagined. Kiara continued to study at San Francisco School, where she was now treated with a respect bordering on admiration. She also continued her training at Isabel's Academy and participated in Leonardo's program. Her first single, a song about resilience and hope, had been released recently and was gaining popularity on digital platforms. Don Ernesto still worked as a janitor, but he now also assisted in the administration of a small recording studio that Leonardo had helped set up in a space donated by the Academy, where young talents from disadvantaged backgrounds could develop their skills. The apartment where they lived remained modest, but it no longer felt like a place of lack, but rather a home brimming with possibilities. One day, as Kiara walked the school hallways, she came face to face with Valentina. The dynamic had shifted so much that now it was Valentina who sometimes seemed uneasy in Kiara's presence. "My mom bought your song," Valentina said, her tone attempting casualness. "She says it reminds her of when she was young." Kiara smiled faintly. "I'm glad she likes it." She was about to move on when Valentina added in a low voice, "I'm sorry about the karaoke thing. It was stupid." Kiara paused and looked at the girl who had tormented her so. "Sometimes bad things lead us to good places," she replied simply, before continuing on to class. There was no hate in her heart, not even resentment. She had learned that the best response to cruelty wasn't more cruelty, but transforming pain into something beautiful, like the notes of a song that linger in the air long after silence has returned. That afternoon, returning home on the bus with her father, Kiara watched the city through the window. The same streets, the same buildings, but everything felt different. "What are you thinking about?" Don Ernesto asked, noticing her pensive gaze. "Mom," she replied, "I think she'd be proud." Don Ernesto took his daughter's hand and squeezed it gently. "She is proud, Kiara. Wherever she is, she's proud." They both fell silent for a moment, thinking of the woman who had taught them about dignity and love before she left. "Leonardo says we might be able to record a whole album next year," Kiara commented after a while. "I want to write a song about her." Don Ernesto smiled, feeling that familiar mix of pain and joy that always accompanied memories of his wife. "It will be the most beautiful song of all," he affirmed with certainty. The story of Kiara Mendoza, the janitor's daughter with a voice that could silence entire auditoriums, began to spread beyond Ciudad del Valle. Local journalists wrote articles about her, highlighting not only her talent but also her journey of overcoming adversity. People started recognizing her on the street, asking for photos or simply saying hello. At school, other students from humble backgrounds found in her an example that dreams weren't reserved only for the privileged. The principal, recognizing the inspirational value of her story, invited her to give a talk to the younger students about the importance of perseverance and mutual respect. Kiara, who had once barely dared to speak in class, now shared her experience with a surprising eloquence for her age. "It doesn't matter where we come from," she told the children looking at her with admiration. "What matters is where we're going, and how we treat others along the way." The community center that Don Ernesto helped manage became a vital space for many young people in their neighborhood. Kids who had previously spent their afternoons on the streets, exposed to dangers and bad influences, now came to learn about music, to express their experiences through art. Don Ernesto, who had always been a quiet, hard-working man, discovered in himself skills he hadn't known he possessed for organizing, for motivating, for building community. "My wife always said that we all have music inside," he'd tell the young people. "Some express it by singing, others by building things that matter." The transformation of the Mendozas inspired others to believe that destiny isn't etched in stone, that there are always possibilities for change when talent meets opportunity and hard work. Kiara's second recital at the Academy was an eagerly anticipated event. This time, Don Ernesto didn't sit in the back row. Isabel insisted on reserving a front row seat for him next to her and Leonardo. The auditorium was packed. Many people were left outside due to lack of space. Among the audience were some of Kiara's classmates, including, surprisingly, Valentina and a couple of her friends. Present too were several of the young people from the community center, dressed in their finest clothes, excited to see someone like them on such an important stage. When Kiara appeared, the audience erupted in applause before she even began to sing. She found her father's gaze and smiled at him. Then she began her performance, a complex piece she had been practicing for months. Her voice filled every corner of the auditorium, telling stories of loss and hope, of falls and rises, of darkness and light. It wasn't just technique the audience heard. It was life transformed into sound. When the recital concluded, a long line of people waited to congratulate Kiara. Music critics, representatives from other academies, fans who had discovered her music on digital platforms. Among them was an elegant older woman in a black dress with a serious expression. When it was her turn to speak with Kiara, the woman introduced herself as Carmen Vidal, director of one of the country's most prestigious conservatories. "Your technique still needs work," she said frankly, "but you have something that cannot be taught. I would like to offer you a place in our international program. You would spend 3 months a year studying at our headquarters." Kiara blinked in surprise. It was an extraordinary opportunity, but it would mean being separated from her father for extended periods. "I need to discuss it with my dad," she replied maturely. Carmen nodded, handing her a card. "Of course, think about it, and talk to your family. Talent like yours deserves every possible path." That night, in their small apartment, Kiara and Don Ernesto had a long conversation. The conservatory's offer represented a new level of opportunity, but also new challenges. "You'd be far from home," Don Ernesto said, trying to hide the sadness in his voice, "and it would be expensive, even with a partial scholarship." Kiara looked at her father, this man who had sacrificed so much for her, who had never stopped believing in her potential. "We can wait," she suggested. "Maybe in a year or two when we've saved more." Don Ernesto shook his head. "Opportunities don't always wait, Kiara. Your mother used to say that when life opens a door for you, you must be brave and walk through it." They fell silent for a moment, thinking of the words of the woman who continued to guide them even in her absence. "We'll find a way," Don Ernesto added finally. "We always do." The news that Kiara had been accepted into the prestigious conservatory spread quickly. Isabel and Leonardo organized a small fundraising event to help with the additional expenses the scholarship wouldn't cover. To everyone's surprise, one of the main donors was Valentina Restrepo's family. "My daughter insisted," Mrs. Restrepo explained, when Don Ernesto tried to thank her, visibly uncomfortable. "She says Kiara has taught her something important." The young people from the community center also wanted to contribute. They organized small performances in plazas and shopping malls with collection cans where people could leave donations. They didn't collect large sums, but every coin represented support and faith in the talent of someone they considered a role model. San Francisco School, recognizing the prestige Kiara's trajectory brought to the institution, announced it would create a special fund to support her musical education, an initiative that would eventually extend to other talented students with limited resources. 3 years have passed since that day at the school karaoke. Kiara is now 14 years old and has traveled more than she ever imagined. She has studied at the conservatory, participated in international competitions, and recorded her first full album. Her voice has become a bridge between worlds that rarely meet, high musical culture and the experiences of those who live on the margins. Don Ernesto no longer works as a janitor. He now directs the community center full-time, which has grown into a recognized cultural foundation supported by various institutions. The small apartment has been replaced by a modest but comfortable house, with a special space where Kiara can practice when she's home. The walls are decorated with photos of her in various venues, with framed awards, and with a large portrait of her mother, who seems to smile proudly from beyond. One afternoon, as Kiara prepares for an important performance at the Ciudad del Valle Municipal Theater, she receives an unexpected visitor in her dressing room. It's Valentina Restrepo, now a teenager, very different from the cruel girl she once was. "I just wanted to wish you luck," she says, visibly nervous. "My family is in the audience." Kiara smiles and thanks her for coming. There's no trace of resentment in her attitude. "Time and success have healed old wounds, you know?" Valentina adds before leaving. "That day at karaoke when we planned, I never imagined I'd be here years later sincerely admiring you. You've taught me more than you think." Kiara feels she understands the weight of those words. Sometimes, the people who try to bring us down end up lifting us up without meaning to, she replies with a wisdom that belies her years. The two teenagers look at each other for a moment. recognizing how much they have grown and changed. The theater is completely full that night. Don Ernesto, dressed in a suit Isabel helped him choose, watches with pride as his daughter walks onto the stage and is greeted with a deafening ovation. Beside him are Isabel, Leonardo, and many of the young people from the community center. There are also critics, journalists, representatives from international record labels. Kiara greets the audience with confidence, so different from that trembling girl at the school karaoke, but with the same purity in her eyes. When she begins to sing, her voice fills the theater with a power and emotion that moves even the most skeptical. Don Ernesto closes his eyes for a moment, allowing his daughter's voice to transport him. He thinks of his wife, of the sacrifices, of the tears, of moments of despair, and also of unexpected joys, of doors that have opened, of dreams that have become reality. "We did it," he whispers, as if she could hear him from wherever she is. When the concert ends, as the audience applauds on their feet, Kiara makes an unexpected gesture. She points to her father in the front row and invites him to join her on stage. Don Ernesto, visibly surprised and moved, walks onto the stage with hesitant steps. Kiara hugs him in front of everyone and takes the microphone again. "This man," she says, her voice breaking with emotion, "taught me that dignity has no price and that dreams don't distinguish last names or bank accounts. Everything I am and everything I have achieved started with him, believing in me when no one else did." The audience applauds with renewed enthusiasm as father and daughter remain embraced center stage under the bright lights, far removed now from those corridors he used to clean and where she used to walk with her gaze lowered. Stories like Kiara's remind us that talent can emerge in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes what seems like our lowest moment can become the starting point for a brilliant future. If this story has moved you, made you reflect, or simply accompanied you for these few minutes, I invite you to share it with someone who might need a reminder that dreams are possible, even when everything seems to be against us. Remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on more stories that inspire, that move, and that remind us of our human capacity to overcome obstacles and transform challenges into opportunities. Life is full of diamonds waiting to be discovered, and perhaps you can be the one to help the next extraordinary voice be heard. M.